Welcome to the Brief History Podcast. Brief history comprehensively packaged under an hour, perfect for your commute, on your lunch break or in your spare time. I'm your host Andrew Knight. Composing and producing is by Harry Edmondson. Today's episode is on the history of the SAS. Thank you for everybody who's reviewed our episodes previously. A big thank you to Alex Chu, who wrote awesome podcasts, so much more detail than I thought there would be. Great choice as well. A lot of these wars I didn't look at when I was at school, so nice to learn about them now. Also, thank you for JBM Herzog, who reached out to us on Twitter to point out that Buller's Army Corps was 45,000, not 30,000. I previously stated on the episode The Boer Wars. Entirely my fault. The research and records at that time were a minefield, so thank you for pointing that out. Reach out to us. We will read out further comments on later episodes, and if you've got any improvements or suggestions, please let us know. Everybody who's commented on the sound and the music on previous episodes, hopefully you can see the improvement. We are working on it, and we're trying to get that perfect podcast. As always, the success of a new podcast relies on its listeners, so please carry on sharing, tweeting, liking, telling your friends and family. We're on all the major social networks: Twitter at Be History Podcast, Facebook and Instagram the same name, and we're on Snapchat too, Be History Podcast. Subscribe to your favourite podcast listening app. That way you'll get the episodes automatically downloaded to your app without you having to do anything. Please find the show notes for all links to our social media, more information about today's episode, and everything else you may need. Thank you. The Special Air Service, SAS, is a special forces unit of the British Army. The SAS was founded in 1941 as a regiment and later reconstituted as a corps in 1950. The unit undertakes a number of roles including covert reconnaissance, counter-terrorism, direct action and hostage rescue. Much of the information actions regarding the SAS is highly classified and is not commented on by the British government or the Ministry of Defence due to the sensitivity of their operations. The Corps currently consists of 22nd Special Air Force Regiment, the regular component under operational command of the United Kingdom Special Forces, as well as the 21st Artist Special Air Service Regiment Reserves and the 23rd Special Air Service Regiment Reserve, which are units under operational command of the 1st Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance Brigade. The Special Air Force Service traces origins to 1941 and the Second World War. It was reformed as part of the Territorial Army in 1947 and named the 21st Special Air Service Regiment Artist Rifles. The 22nd Special Air Service Regiment, which is part of the regular army, gained fame and recognition worldwide after its televised rescue of all but one of the hostages held during the 1980 Iranian embassy siege. The Special Air Service was a unit of the British Army during the Second World War and was formed in July 1941 by David Stirling and originally called L Detachment Special Air Service Brigade. The L designation and Air Service name being a tie-in to British disinformation campaign trying to deceive the Axis into thinking there was a paratrooper regiment with numerous units operating in the area. The real SAS would prove to the Axis that the fake one existed. It was conceived as a commando force to operate behind enemy lines in North Africa campaign and initially consisted of 5 officers and 60 other ranks. Its first mission in November 1941 was a parachute drop in support of Operation Crusader offensive. Due to German resistance and adverse weather conditions, the mission was a disaster. 22 men, a third of the unit, was killed or captured. Its second mission was a major success. Transported by the Long Range Desert Group, it attacked 3 airfields in Libya, destroying 60 aircraft with the loss of 2 men and 3 jeeps. In September 1942, it was renamed 1st SAS, consisting at that time of 4 British squadrons, 1 Free French, 1 Greek and 1 Folboat Section. In January 1943, Colonel Stirling was captured in Tunisia and Paddy Mayne replaced him as commander. In April 1943, the 1st SAS was recognised in the Special Raiding Squadron under Mayne's command, and the Special Boat Squadron was placed under command of George Jellicoe. The Special Raiding Squadron fought in Sicily and Italy along with the 2nd SAS, which had been formed in North Africa in 1943, in part by renaming the small-scale raiding force. The Special Boat Squadron fought in the Aegean Islands and Diocese until the end of the war. In 1944, the SAS Brigade was formed from the 1st British and 2nd SAS and French 3rd and 4th SAS and the Belgian 5th SAS. It was tasked with parachute operations behind enemy lines in France and carried out operations supporting the Allied advance through France, Operations Houndsworth, Bull Basket, Leuthen and Wallace Hardy in Belgium, the Netherlands, Operation Pegasus, and eventually in Germany, Operation Archway. As a result of Hitler's issuing under the commando order on 18th of October 1942, the members of the unit faced the additional danger that would be summarily executed if ever captured by the Germans. In July 1944, following Operation Bull Basket, 34 captured SAS commanders were summarily executed by the Germans. In October 1944, in the aftermath of Operation Leuthen, another 31 captured SAS commandos were summarily executed by the Germans. At the end of the war, the British government saw no further need for the force and disbanded it on the 8th of October 1945. The following year, it was decided there was a need for a long-term deep penetration commando unit, and a new SAS regiment was raised as part of the Territorial Army. Ultimately, the Artist Rifles, raised in 1860 and headquartered at Duke's Road at Euston, took on the SAS mantle as the 21st SAS Regiment on the 1st of January 1947. In 1950, a 21st SAS Squadron was raised to fight in the Korean War. After 3 months of training in Britain, it was informed that the squadron would no longer be required in Korea, and so it instead volunteered to fight in the Malayan emergency. Upon arrival in Malaya, it came under command of Mike Calvert, who was forming a new unit called the Malayan Scouts. Calvert was already formed one squadron from 100 volunteers in the Far East, which became A Squadron. The 21st SAS Squadron then became B Squadron, and after a recruitment visit to Rhodesia by Calvert, C Squadron was formed from 1,000 Rhodesian volunteers. The Rhodesians returned home after 3 years' service and were replaced by a New Zealand squadron. By this time, the need for a regular Army SAS regiment was recognised, and the 22nd SAS Regiment was formed, added to the Army list, and in 1952 it had been based at Hereford since 1960. In 1959, the 3rd Regiment, the 23rd SAS Regiment, was formed by renaming the Reserve Reconnaissance Unit, which had been succeeded MI-19, whose members were experts in escape and evasion. Since serving in Malaya, men from the regular Army 22nd SAS Regiment had taken part in covert reconnaissance and surveillance by patrols and some larger-scale raiding missions in Borneo. An operation against the communist guerrillas included the Battle of Mirbat in Oman. They had also taken part in operations in Adan Emergency, Northern Ireland and Gambia. Their Special Projects team assisted the West German counter-terrorism group GSG-9 at Mogadishu. The SAS counter-terrorist wing famously took part in a hostage rescue operation during the Iranian embassy siege in London. During the Falklands War, B Squadron was prepared for Operation Mikado before it was subsequently cancelled, while D and G Squadrons were deployed and participated in raids on Pebble Island. Operation Flavius was a controversial operation in Gibraltar against the Provisional Irish Republican Army, the PRRA. 22 SAS also directed NATO aircraft onto Serbian positions and hunted war criminals in Bosnia. They were also involved in the Kosovo War, helping KLA guerrillas behind Serbian lines. According to Albanian sources, one SAS sergeant was killed by Serbian special forces. The Gulf War, in which A, B and D squadrons deployed, was the largest SAS mobilisation since the Second World War, also notable for the failure of Bravo 20 mission. In Sierra Leone, it took part in Operation Paratrooper, a hostage rescue operation to extract members of the Royal Irish Regiment. Following the September 11 attacks on the United States by Al-Qaeda in 2001, two core squadrons of 22 SAS, reinforced by members of both the territorial SAS units, deployed to Afghanistan as part of the coalition invasion and start of the war in Afghanistan from 2001 to present, to dismantle and destroy Al-Qaeda and deny its base of safe operations in Afghanistan by removing the Taliban from power in the war on terror. The regiment carried out Operation Trent, the largest operation in its history, which included its first wartime HALO parachute jump, high altitude low opening parachute jump. Following the invasion, the regiment continued to operate in Afghanistan against the Taliban and other insurgents in 2006, where its deployment Iraq became its focus of operations until 2009, when SAS redeployed to Afghanistan. The regiment took part in the Iraq War, notably carrying out operations in Iraq before the 2003 invasion. Following the invasion, it formed part of Task Force Black Knight to combat the pre- and post-invasion insurgency. In late 2005, early 2006, the SAS were integrated into JSOC and focused its counterinsurgency efforts on combating Al-Qaeda in Iraq and the Sunni insurgency alongside Delta Force. The counterinsurgency was successful, and the UK SF mission in Iraq ended in May 2009. Various British newspapers have speculated on SAS involvement in Operation Al-Ami and in 2011 Libyan civil war. The Daily Telegraph reports that, quote, defence sources confirmed that the SAS had been in Libya for several weeks and played a key role in coordinating the fall of Tripoli, end quote. While the Guardian reports, quote, they've been acting as forward air controllers, directing pilots to targets and communicating with NATO operational commanders. They've also been advising rebels on tactics, end quote. Members of the Special Air Service were deployed to northern Iraq in late August 2014, and according to former MI6 chief Richard Barrett, would also be sent to Syria, tasked with trying to track down the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant ISIL terrorist group, ISIS, that the press had labelled the Beatles. In October 2014, the SAS began executing raids against ISIS supply lines in western Iraq, using helicopters to drop light vehicles manned by sniper squads. It's been claimed that the SAS had killed up to 8 ISIL fighters per day since the raids began. In recent years, SAS officers have risen to the highest ranks in the British Army. General Peter de Billier was the Commander-in-Chief of the British forces in the 1990 Gulf War. General Mike Rose became Commander of the United Nations Protection Force in Bosnia in 1994. In 1997, General Charles Guthrie became Chief of Defence Staff, the head of the British Armed Forces. Lieutenant General Cedric Delves was appointed Commander of Field Army and Deputy Commander-in-Chief NATO Regional Headquarters in Allied Forces North in 2002 to 2003. Following the post-war reconstruction of the Special Air Service, other countries in the Commonwealth recognised their need for similar units. The Canadian Special Air Service Company was formed in 1947, being disbanded in 1949. The New Zealand Special Air Service Squadron was formed in June 1955 to serve with the British SAS in Malaya, and which became a full regiment. The Special Air Service Regiment SASR in 1964. On its return from Malaya, the Sea Squadron Rhodesians formed the basis for the creation of the Rhodesian Special Air Service in 1961. It retained the name Sea Squadron Special Air Service within the Rhodesian Security Forces until 1978, when it became the first Special Air Service Regiment. Non-Commonwealth countries also formed units based on the SAS. The Belgium Army's Special Forces Group, which wears the same cap badge as the British SAS, traces its ancestry partly from the 5th Special Air Service of the Second World War. The French 1st Marine Infantry Parachute Regiment can trace its origins to the Second World War. 3rd and 4th SAS adopted its Who Dares Wins motto. The American 1st Special Forces Operation Detachment Delta was formed by Colonel Charles Alvin Beckworth, who served with the 22nd SAS and an exchange officer, and recognised the need for a similar unit in the United States Army. The Israeli Seretet Maktal was also been modelled on the SAS, sharing its motto. Ireland's Army Ranger Wing, ARW, has also modelled its training on that of the SAS. The Filipino National Police's Special Action Force was also formed along the same lines. Little publicity, veritable information exists on the contemporary SAS, as the British government usually does not comment on Special Forces matter due to the nature of their work. The Special Air Service comprises 3 units, 1 regular and 2 Army Reserve units. The Army unit is 22nd SAS Regiment, and the units are reserved for 21st and 23rd. 22 SAS normally has a strength of 400 to 600. The regiment has 4 operational squadrons, A, B, D and G. Each squadron consists of approximately 65 men commanded by a major, divided into 4 troops, each troop being commanded by a captain and a small headquarters section. Troops usually consist of 15 men, and each patrol within a troop consists of 4 men, with each man possessing a particular skill, i.e. signals, demolition, medic or linguistic, in addition to basic skills learned during the course of his training. The term squadron dates back to the unit's earliest days, when the unit's name was intended to confuse German intelligence. The 4 troops specialise in 4 different areas. Boat troop specialise in maritime skills, including diving, using rebreathers, using kayaks, canoes and rigid hulled inflatable boats, and often trained with the Special Boat Service. Air troop experts in free-fall parachutes and high-altitude parachute operations, including high-altitude low opening (HALO) and high-altitude high opening (HAHO) techniques. Mobility troop specialists in using vehicles and are experts in desert warfare. They also trained in an advanced level of motor mechanics to field repair any vehicle breakdown. Mountain troop specialists in Arctic survival and combat, using specialist equipment such as skis, snowshoes and mountain climbing techniques. In 1980, Arc Squadron, which has since been renamed L Detachment, was formed. Its members are all ex-regular SAS soldiers, however committed to reserve service. 22 SAS squadron duty rotations are set up as such that one squadron is maintained on counter-terrorism duty in the UK, a second will be on deployment, a third will be preparing for deployment whilst conducting short-term training, and the fourth will be preparing for long-term overseas training such as jungle or desert exercising. In times of war, such as the 2003 invasion of Iraq, it is not uncommon for two squadrons to be deployed. The Special Products Team is the official name for the Special Air Service Anti-Hijacking Counter-Terrorism Team. It is trained in close-quarter battle, sniper techniques, and specialises in hostage rescue in buildings and on public transport. The team was formed in the early 1970s after Prime Minister Edward Heath asked the Ministry of Defence to prepare for any possible terrorist attack similar to the massacre at the 1972 Summer Olympics, therefore ordering that the SAS Counter-Revolutionary Warfare CRW wing be raised. Once the wing has been established, each squadron rotated on a continual basis through counter-terrorist training, including hostage rescue, siege breaking and live firing exercises. It has been reported that during CRW training, each soldier expends as much as 100,000 pistol rounds. Squadrons refresh their training every 16 months on average. The CRW's first deployment was during the Barkham Street siege. The Metropolitan Police had trapped PRIA units. It surrendered when it heard on the BBC that the SAS were being sent in. The first documented action abroad by the CRW wing was assisting the West German counter-terrorism group GSG at Mogadishu. In 1980, the SAS was involved in dramatic hostage rescues during the Iranian siege. The CT role was shared amongst the squadrons, initially on a 12-month and later 6-month rotational basis, to ensure that all members were eventually trained in CT and CQB techniques. The SAS trained for CT role at Portrillis Army Training Area in a facility that includes the Killing House, the official name of the Close Quarter Battle House, and part of the Boeing 747 airliner that can be reconfigured to match the internal layouts of virtually any commercial aircraft. The Encore CT squadron is split into 4 troops, 2 of which are on immediate notice to move and are restricted to Hereford Creedon Hill area, whilst the other 2 conduct training and exercises across the UK, but are available for operational deployment should the needs arise. The 22nd Special Air Service is under the Operational Commander, the Director Special Forces DSF, a Major General grade post. The previously ranked as Brigadier, the DSF was promoted from Brigadier to Major General in recognition of the significant expansion of the United Kingdom Special Forces, the UKSF. During Operation Henrik, the SAS Reserve was responsible for mentoring members of the Afghan National Police. Following a review of the unit's operational capacity, they were withdrawn from their tasking and their task was handed over to regular infantry troops. The report found that SAS reservists lacked a clearly defined role and also stated that reservists lacked the military capability and skill set to serve alongside the regular special forces. On the 1st of September 2014, 21 and 23 SAS left the United Kingdom Special Forces and were placed under the command of the 1st Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance Brigade. Recruitment, Selection, Training. Regular elements of the United Kingdom Special Forces never recruit directly from the general public. All current members of the United Armed Forces can apply for Special Forces selection, but historically the majority of the candidates have a commando or airborne forces background. Selections are held twice yearly in summer and winter in Senior Bridge and the Brecon Beacons. Selection lasts for 5 weeks and normally starts with about 200 potential candidates. Upon arrival, candidates first complete a personal fitness test and an annual fitness test, PFT and AFT. They then march cross-country across the clock, increasing the distance covered each day, culminating in what is known as endurance. There is a march of 40 miles with full equipment scaling and descaling penny fan in 20 hours. By the end of the hill phase, candidates must be able to run 4 miles in 30 minutes and swim 2 miles in 90 minutes or less. Following the hill phase and jungle phase that takes place in Belize, Brunei or Malaysia, candidates are taught navigational, patrol formation, movement and jungle survival skills. Candidates returning to Hereford finish training in battle plans and foreign weapons and take part in combat survival exercises, the final one being the week-long escape and evasion. Candidates are formed into patrols and carry nothing more than a tin can filled with survival equipment, are dressed in old Second World War uniforms and hope to head for a point by first light. The final selection test is arguably the most grueling, resistance to interrogation (RTI) lasting for 36 hours. Typically 15 to 20% of candidates make it through the hill phase selection process. From approximately 200 candidates, most will drop out within the first few days, and by the end about 30 will remain. Those who complete all phases selection are rewarded with a transfer to an operational squadron. Normal barracks headdress is a sand-coloured beret. Its cap badge is downward pointed Excalibur, wreathed in flames, often incorrectly referred to as a winged dagger, worked into a cloth of Crusader shield with the motto "Who Dares Wins." SAS pattern parachute wings designed by Lieutenant Jock Lewes and based on the stylized sacred ibis wings of Isis of Egyptian iconography depicted in the decor of Shepherd's Hotel in Cairo, are worn on the right shoulder. Its ceremonial No. 1 dress uniform is distinguished by a light blue stripe on the trousers. Its sable belt is a hand shade of blue similar to the blue stripe of the No. 1 dress uniform. In the British Army, battle honours are awarded to regiments that have been active service in significant engagement campaign, generally victorious outcome. The Special Air Service Regiment has been awarded with the following battle honours: North West Europe 1944-45, Tobruk 1941, Benghazi Raid, North Africa 1940-43, landed in Sicily 1943, Timoli, Valle del Comancio, Italy 1943-45, Greece 44-45, Adriatic, Middle Eastern 1943-44, Falkland Wars 1982, Western Iraq, Gulf 1991. Memorials. The names of those members of the regular SAS who have died on duty were inscribed on the regimental clock at Stirling Lines, originally funded by contributions of the days paid by members of the regiment and a donation from Hadley Page in memory of Corporal R.K. Norrie, who was killed in a free-fall parachute accident. This was rebuilt at the new barracks at Creedon Hill. Those whose names are inscribed are said by surviving members to have failed to beat the clock. At the suggestion of then Commanding Officer Dare Wilson, inscribed on the base of the clock is a verse from the Golden Road to Markland by James Enroy Flecker. Quote, "We are pilgrims, masters. We shall go, always a little further, it may be, beyond that blue mountain bed with snow, across that angry or that glimmering sea." End quote. The other main memorial is the SAS and Airborne Forces Memorial in the cloisters at Westminster Abbey. The SAS Brigade Memorial at Saint-Gilles-le-Grand in France commemorates the wartime dead of the Belgian, British and French SAS, and recently a memorial plaque was added to the David Stirling Memorial in Scotland. There are other smaller memorials scattered throughout Europe and the Far East. The local church is St Martin's, Hereford, has part of its graveyard set aside as an SAS memorial. Over 20 SAS soldiers are buried there. There is also a wall of remembrance displaying memorial plaques to some of who could not be buried, including 18 SAS men who lost their lives in the Sea King helicopter crash during the Falklands campaign on the 19th of May 1982, and a sculpture stained glass window dedicated to the SAS. On the 17th of October 2017, Ascension, a new sculpture and window harbouring Special Air Service Regiment in Hereford Cathedral, was dedicated by Bishop Hereford at their service attended by Prince William. The founding of the SAS. Stirling was commissioned into the Scots Guards from Ampleforth College Contingent Officer Training Corps on the 24th of July 1937. In June 1940, he volunteered for the new 8th Commando under Lieutenant Colonel Robert Laycock, which would become part of Force Z, later renamed Lay Force. On the 1st of February 1941, Lay Force sailed for the Middle East in support of the capture of Rhodes, but were soon disbanded after suffering heavy casualties in the Battle of Crete and the Battle of Litani River. Stirling remained convinced that due to the mechanicized nature of war, a small team of highly trained soldiers with advantage of surprise could attack several targets from the desert in a single night. Believing that taking his idea up through the chain of command was unlikely to work, Stirling decided to go straight to the top. On crutches following a parachute accident, he stealthily entered Middle East headquarters in Cairo, and in an effort to see Commander-in-Chief General Claude Aleknek spotted by guards, he abandoned his crutches and entered the building, only to come face to face with an officer he'd previously fallen out with. Retreating rapidly, entered the office of the Deputy Chief General Ritchie. Stirling explained his plan to Ritchie. The latter immediately persuaded Aleknek to allow Stirling to form a new Special Forces unit. The unit was given the misleading name L Detachment Special Air Service Brigade to reinforce Dudley Clark's deception of a parachute brigade existing in North Africa. Short of equipment, particular tents and related gear, at the onset when they set up base at Curbridge Air Base, the first operation of the new SAS was to relieve a nearby well-equipped Air New Zealand regiment of tents, bedding, tables, chairs and numerous other supplies, including the piano. After at least 4 trips, they had a well-stocked camp. After a brief period of training, an initial attempt at attacking a German airfield by parachute landing on the 16th of November 1941 in support of Operation Crusader was disastrous. Of the original 55 men, some 34 were killed, captured far from target after being blown off course or landing in the wrong area. During one of the biggest storms hit the area, escaping with the help of the long-range desert group who were designated to pick up the unit after the attack, Stirling agreed that approaching by land under cover of darkness would be the safer and more effective than parachuting. As quickly as possible, he organised raids on ports using this simple method, often bluffing through checkpoints at night using language skills of some of his soldiers. Under his leadership, the Lewis bomb, the first handheld dual explosive and incendiary device invented by Jock Lewis. American troops were able to deal with harsh desert terrain better than any other transport. The jeeps were cut down, adapted and fitted with Vickers K machine guns fore and aft. He also pioneered the use of small groups to escape detonation. Finding it difficult to lead from the rear, Stirling often led from the front, his SAS troops driving through enemy airfields to shoot up aircraft and crew, replacing the easily operational strategy of attaching bombs to enemy aircraft on foot. The first Jeep-borne aircraft raid occurred soon after acquiring the first batch of Jeeps in 1942. When Stirling's SAS group attacked Bagush airfield along with 2 other Axis airfields, all in the same night. After returning to Cairo, Stirling collected a consignment of jeeps from further airfield raids. His biggest success was on the night of the 26th to 27th of June 1942, when his SAS Squadron with 18 jeeps raided Sidi Hanesh landing strip and destroyed 37 aircraft, mostly bombers and heavy transport, for the loss of just one man killed. After his drive through the desert and invading enemy troops and aircraft, Stirling and his men reached the safety of their advanced camp at Paratrooper at the edge of Qattara Depression. These hit-and-run operations eventually proved Stirling's undoing. He was captured by the Germans in January 1943. He was dubbed the Phantom Major by Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. Although he escaped, he was subsequently recaptured by the Italians, who took great delight in the embarrassment this caused to the German allies. A further 4 escape attempts were made before Stirling was finally sent to Colditz Castle, where he remained for the rest of the war. He arrived on the 20th of August 1944 and was tasked with setting Colditz British Intelligence Unit. After his recapture, Paddy Mayne took command of the SAS. In North Africa, in the 15 months before Stirling's capture, the SAS had destroyed over 250 aircraft on the ground, dozens of supply dumps, wrecked railways and telecommunications, and had put hundreds of enemy vehicles out of action. Field Marshal Montgomery described Stirling as quite mad, but believed that men like Stirling were needed in the war. Thank you for listening to the Brief History Podcast, this week's episode on the SAS. Please share, like, follow, subscribe on all our social media sites, especially on your favourite podcast listening app, as if you subscribe, you don't need to then download the episode. It will be downloaded for you automatically. Please reach out to us on social media. We do enjoy the chats. Let me know of any previous podcasts, if there's any mistakes, if you've got any improvement, or if you just want to tell us, like other people have, how much you enjoy it. We really do like reading the reviews. Please may it continue. I've been your host, Andrew Knight, and we'll see you next week.